Jorgen Lund Madsen nos va a describir la estrategia seguida por Copenhague para ser merecedora del título European Green Capital 2014. El señor Lund es ingeniero civil por la Universidad Técnica de Dinamarca y ha desempeñado diferentes actividades y responsabilidades en el Gobierno de Dinamarca. En la actualidad es director de gestión técnica y ambiental del Copenhavens Commune de la ciudad de Copenhague. Señor Lund.
Good morning, and thank you first of all for giving me the opportunity to speak to all of you and tell you a little about my city. I wonder if this works. Can you hear me here? Can I speak like this? I'd like to walk around a little bit. Well, the city of Copenhagen, just a few figures. We are just about 2 million people living in the city of Copenhagen. But the municipality, we are only around 600,000. And these 600,000 people are living in the dense area in the center of the city. So when I'm talking to you now about the Copenhagen, I mean mainly the 600,000 people living in the center of Copenhagen. Well, if you look at this picture up here to the left, I'm sure that many of you are thinking, if this is sustainability, that's not me. But actually, it is for many people in Copenhagen. And we are not forcing people to use their bikes when it's snowing in Copenhagen. They're just doing it. That's something that is that you should think about. Why are they doing this? And actually, you could say it's quite easy for us in Copenhagen because it's a very central part of our culture to use our bike. So you could say it's much more easy for us to take the bike than it is in other countries because it's our culture to do so. We learn to bike when we learn to walk. So we all have a bike. So it's quite easy, but still, why are people using their bikes even though that they, on their way to work, they do it when it's snowing, it's raining? And of course, there are many days where it's much more easy to use your bike and it's much more polite and nice. Oops. No, it doesn't work. Do I have to point somewhere? No, the presentation is not over. Can someone help continue some technical? Ah, fine. Thank you. You can see that there's a lot of people using their bikes. And I'll just tell you a little about bikes because it's quite central for sustainability in Copenhagen. It's a signal. And on actually a little more than nearly 40% use their bike to the work or the university or school every day. We have in Copenhagen, in the central part of Copenhagen, nearly 250 kilometers of bike path. And in this, for example, on this road, nearly 30,000 bikes passes every day. I'll come back to this about bikes. Well, the tourist organization in Copenhagen has trying to sell our city as a fairy tale. Well, a fairy tale is not true. And of course, Copenhagen is not a fairy tale. The more true story is that we are working hard to become a city where it is sustainable. And when we say sustainable, we mean where people like to live, where people like to work, and where people like to come and visit us. And it's quite easy to find some places in the city where it's not so. Still, we have some challenges to change the city. And you can even see when we talk about bikes, the picture in the bottom here in the middle. Well, 20 years ago, this square was filled with cars, and we accused the cars from taking the place in the city. Now it's actually the bikes that are taking the place in the city and making it difficult to find somewhere to park your bike and somewhere to walk. So we have new challenges. I'll come back to this about the cities and the role And of course, well, back in '92, when the first Rio conference was there, it was very difficult to see that cities actually had a central role. And as we just heard, today it's more realized that city has a big role when it comes to the big questions about sustainability in the world. We have a strategy in Copenhagen where we believe that sustainability, as you can see here, which is also about protecting the environment, that sustainability should be connected very much to the quality of life for the citizens in the city. The daily life of the citizens is a very important part of sustainability as well. And also the economy is a very central part of sustainability. And when you talk about sustainability, don't forget this connection. It's very important. And when we have a vision for Copenhagen, we have more than one vision, but this vision is very central. It is that we want to make the best urban environment and a unique urban life. And we have two central strategies, plans that we are building this on. The first one is that we want to make a green and blue capital, and the other one is that we want to make a clean and healthy city. And of course, this is very political, and the important thing is that the strategy is supported by all parties in the city's government nowadays. I would like to focus on two elements that support this strategy. The one is the world's best city for cyclists. The other one is that we have a decision that we want to be carbon neutral in 2025. But before I do so, I'll come back to this about Local Agenda 21. Because for us, it's very important that, as you can see, that citizens are actually the experts of everyday life. It's not the city government or the national governments or the companies, it's actually the citizens. And we cannot move if we do not have the experts to move, to change the behavior. The other thing is that if we want to reach our goals, we need that the citizens have a very strong involvement in it. Not just to support the politicians, but their own behavior, their own involvement is very important. Well, our Local Agenda 21 strategy, well, the first one we had was actually back in '92. Now we have a new one from 12 to 15. And there are 4 elements that we focus on. The first one is on transport. And our goals is that the citizens should not just bike, they should also change, if they are not biking, they should also change their way of driving a car. For example, they should buy new cars, changing to to electricity or biofuels. When it comes at home, you need to change your behavior. You need to do something where you buy the fridge that are very, very well on energy sufficient. When it comes to public areas, of course we need a clean city. We need a city that is well maintained, and we try to involve the citizens in doing so. It's not just a municipal job, it's also a citizen's job to do so. And when it comes to resources, it's very important for us to convince people that, of course, you should not use so much energy, but also very central that waste is actually a resource. Even though that we recycle more than 60% of our waste in Copenhagen today, and even though that we only have 2% that goes to landfills, we still have a lot of waste that can be recycled or reused in a proper way if people consider that waste is actually a resource. Last year, we actually have 2 rainfalls that flooded a lot of the city, and it also flooded many private homes. And since then, we have had no problems getting money to prevent the same accidents. And that's, of course, a part of the climate change. That is that we have to adapt to the future in Copenhagen. Copenhagen is by the sea, and it's very flat. So it costs a lot of money to prevent flooding in Copenhagen in the future. And after these 2 accidents, then it's not difficult anymore. The other side of it is, of course, that we have a plan to reduce our own emissions in Copenhagen. And the plan is very ambitious, but we believe it's realistic. The plan is that we should reduce our emissions, or we should be CO2 neutral in 2025. At the same time, we know that we will grow with 110,000 people. So that's a challenge. But of course, we have a plan. You can see here that there's a lot of different measures to reach the goal. And the important thing about it is that it's all sectors of the society, all sectors of the municipality that should support us. And I have to say that they do nowadays, and the municipality, the city council has adapted this plan, and no one voted against it, from the right to the left. It has 4 central elements: energy consumption, energy production, mobility, and then the city administration itself. And I'll try to focus on the 2 in the middle, the energy production and mobility. When it comes to mobility, we have some goals. 75% of all trips in Copenhagen should be on foot, by bike or public transport. We have a goal of 50% of all trips to work or school in Copenhagen by bike. And I mentioned before, it's nearly 40% already, so it's not unrealistic. We have a goal of 20% more passengers in public transport. Public transport, of course, should be carbon neutral. And private light vehicles should change to other kind of fuels. And of course, you can see here that even though that on the left you can see that transport is only 11% of what we should reduce, it's actually still something that is very important. And you can see on the right-hand side that, for example, cyclists if we grew to 50%, we can reduce with 30% of the 11% on the left. What's actually important here is maybe not the exact figures, but the important thing is that we have the figures and we can show them to people and the politicians so they can be convinced that this is not unrealistic, and we measure all the time. Then we want to be the world's best city for cyclists. And we don't do that just because that it's good for the environment. We also do it because the society in general benefits from cycling. It gives a longer life to the citizens and a better health. It gives more space for an urban life. Of course, it gives some new challenges. I mentioned before that bikes also take some space in the city. Less CO2, less congestions, and of course we can brand our city as being the best bicycles in the world. Just to show you that we are biking from we are 2 years old and all the way through, and it's good for the health. And of course it costs a lot to invest in biking, but it's much more cheap than it is to invest in cars. And we have actually calculated that if you go 3 kilometers on your bike, you gain for the city or for the society €1. And every day, people in Copenhagen drive millions of kilometers. So it's very good for the economy, not just for the individual, but also for the society. Can it work in other countries, in other cities? Well, I will not be an expert on that. Just tell you that, of course, it's easier, as I mentioned in the start, in Copenhagen, because we have a culture that means that we start cycling when we are 2. But it might work in other cities, or you should build actually your sustainability and the most visible thing you do on the culture you have in your city, in your local authority. And it might not be biking, it might be something different. Energy production, I will go through it a little faster. Of course, district heating is very important for us. 99% of all buildings in Copenhagen is connected to district heating. And it's very important when it comes to CO2 emissions. So we will make district heating in the future that is coming from heating that is carbon neutral. We want to make electricity production that's based on wind and biomass, and we need actually to have more wind and biomass energy production that we actually use in the city. And that's because in other sectors we actually emit CO2. So we have to, if we want an overall to be neutral, we have to have more windmills than we actually need in Copenhagen. And then we have plastic waste, and we have to separate. It sounds a little strange, that's a little sector, but it's very important to us because nowadays we incinerate the last part of our waste, our household waste. So we have to take out the plastic to make it clean and to reuse the plastic. And then of course, they make biogasification of the organic waste in the future. And again, you can see that we have figures showing the importance of doing so. I'll not go into details. We need 100 wind turbines before 2025, more than we have today. These windmills that you can see here is actually inside the city of Copenhagen, offshore, and they are very visible from Copenhagen. And they are actually 20 years old now. And there is a limit how many windmills we could put up in the dense city. So we have to put windmills outside of the city. But still we can make windmills inside the city in a high degree. And people actually in Denmark believe that windmills is not as simple, that is ugly. It's actually a part of life, it's part of a signal of sustainability, like your bike. Then we also believe that all this about sustainability is something that is good for the economy in Copenhagen. And as you can see here, some figures. The blue one in the top is actually the green technology in Copenhagen. And you can see that the growth of green technology in Copenhagen and the export of it has been much stronger than any other sectors in Copenhagen. And this is something that also convinces both industry, universities, citizens, politicians, that this is something to support, something to build on. And another way that we try to convince that it's a good way to do it is that this is a result, the cancellation of new jobs created by having this strategy for carbon neutrality. And you can see that we can create more than 30,000 jobs in Copenhagen by doing so. This is also something that convinced people that this is the right strategy and it is important to put money into it. But there's something that is very important also, that is to have some landmarks that make it very visible that sustainability is important. You can see the windmills, you can see the bike lanes, you can see that we also built in the harbor of Copenhagen places for swimming, and in the middle there's a production of biomass. And in the top, that's actually a dike we are building around a part of Copenhagen to protect Copenhagen from the rising oceans. But the visibility for people is very important. Here's another way to show visibility. The top is that you can see the development of serious injured cyclists in Copenhagen. It's going very good. Even though we are so many people using our bikes every day, we have a target of decreasing the number of injured people. In the lower part, you can see that we have actually already reached our goal for 2015 for carbon reduction. It was so that we set a goal in 2005, and we have already reached it in 2012. This is also showing people this is not unrealistic. It is possible to do so. And of course, another thing that is good for the citizens of Copenhagen is that they could be proud of what they're doing. For example, we have just been announced the European Green Capital in 2014. And we have in, for example, this magazine, Monocle, we was pronounced that we are the city in the world with the highest class of livability, which is something that is, of course, we can tell, that I can tell it now, but it's very important inside the city that you have something where you can be proud of, you are doing something and people tell you that you can be proud about it. Well, let me finally just tell you what's actually behind the results, the action we are doing in Copenhagen. And the first thing is we set up some grand visions and some very tough goals. We have some very detailed but actually flexible plans to support the vision. Our initiatives, it's very important that they are set right so they support the plans. It's very important that we involve the citizens, we involve the business in the city, we involve the organizations, and a strong cooperation is very important. It's important that we monitor how it's going, and it's very important that we show to the politicians, we show to the citizens, that to anyone, that the policy that we are doing is making new jobs. It's very good for the environment, it's good for the health of the people, it's very good, it's very sustainable, and we have to document that all the time. And then, of course, visible results, as I mentioned. So this is actually our formula to make success on sustainability at the local level. I'm quite sure this formula is our formula. It doesn't fit in all places, but it's important for us that we stick to this, then we will reach our goal in 2025. Thank you very much for your attention.